Hi, I'm Lindsay Walker of Walker Jewelry, and today I'm going to share with you a little bit about sand casting. Sand casting is a great form of casting for small studio work if you want to take your ideas from wax carvings, or if you have any kind of three-dimensional or two-dimensional item lying around and you want to cast it into metal. It's a really economical way to make your ideas come to life. And I'm just going to show you some of the materials that you need for it. It is a little bit tricky, but I promise if you stick with it, you'll get the hang of it. And I just wanted to thank Tennessee Craft Mid-State Chapter for awarding me with a micro grant so that I can share a little bit about my knowledge and what I know from sand casting with you in this online tutorial. Okay, so the first step that you're going to have to do is breaking up the sand. The more fine and broken up the sand is, the easier it will be to work with. There's definitely some issues that can come with not breaking up your sand or having any kind of debris in it. So you want to just break it up as much as you can. One other thing you're gonna need, which I forgot to mention, is a trusty hammer. One that is not too fancy, one that can definitely do some pounding. Okay, so I'm just loosely packing in my first part of my mold right now. And this is what I'm going to press my ring into, so I don't want it to be too packed. Because then I won't be able to press my object into the sand. As I hammer, I add more sand. And now I'm going to scrape off the top layer with my ruler. I'm going to see and make sure that it's nice and flat and even. If you have any uneven parts, like right here, then you can just add more sand to it. And scrape it again. Oh, and keep going. As sand gets older, like this sand is pretty old, so it actually really would help to spray it down with some water. That's a nice little trick you can do. But we'll see if this one works. If it doesn't, then I'm gonna go get my water. Okay. So this is the first layer. It's nice and soft. Now I'm gonna add my jeweler's talc. And again, this is to prevent any kind of sticking. And I'm just going to lightly brush the talc all over my surface. And I'm going to take the ring that I carved right here, and I'm also going to put talc all over it. so that it doesn't stick to the sand either. Okay, if you have a cattle dog in your studio, please make sure that they're not eating your Delft sand clay, as my dog is trying to do. So, just never know what they'll get into. The CO, I'm just lightly painting over the top onto my ring. There's a lot of edges and nooks and crannies in this ring. I don't want it to get stuck in the sand. So you have to think the whole time that you're doing this, how your impression will look. Okay, so now I'm going to press my ring into the sand. So just thinking about this, I know this is a multi-step process. This is the first step. But when I have both of my parts on, the metal is gonna come from this angle, and it's gonna go down and fill in this cavity, which it will be a cavity soon. So just think about that as you're placing your object. And I only press it in halfway so that I can retrieve it easily. And right now I'm just brushing off any excess talc and making sure I'm getting inside of the ring as well and on the outer edges. Okay, now I'm ready to put my other half on. And you can see how it looks. Now I'm gonna fill it with more sand. Okay, so now you want to carefully open this 2-part mold up to retrieve my ring. And you can tell if it was done correctly at this point. Okay, so now I have to take out my wax ring from the mold, and sometimes I use tweezers to do that. I'm gonna try to wiggle it out. No, I'm gonna use tweezers. And you want to be careful with this part because obviously if too much sand is taken out, then your ring will not look accurate. So just go as slowly as you can. If there's any sand that kind of came up, you can sort of press it back down. And then take your brush and brush it away. You definitely want to get any loose sand that might be inside of your cavity. Okay, so we've got 2 parts where our metal is going to flow into, and we need to make air holes. And I always like to make air holes on one side. I just happen to pick this side for whatever reason. Okay, so here's my brass rod that I use to make the air holes, and you can do as many as you want. I always just start at the top, go all the way through. You want to evenly space them out on both sides as well. You know, and I've casted things as well without doing air holes, and it was okay. It wasn't the end of the world. But, you know, they're still good to do. Sometimes the metal needs somewhere to go, and sometimes there's just too much pressure and you might end up with porous cast. So, all right, so I have my holes, as you can see. Now I'm going to just draw little channels from my ring to the air hole. And everyone kind of does this a little bit differently who sand casts. Some people make pretty large channels. I just like to make little cuts like this. This gives the metal somewhere to go if it needs to. And again, just brush off any excess sand. You don't want that in your cast, because that will definitely create pits in your metal. The next thing you're gonna do to both sides is to just carve out a little channel for your metal to flow more easily. And that's gonna look different depending on what caster you use. With this one, I just try to make like a little cut right here. Just take away a little bit of sand so it has somewhere to go. Loretta, hush. And then I'm gonna build up the sand as well right here. We don't want to contaminate our metal. I'm gonna be pouring 14 karat white gold into this cast. It doesn't make too much of a difference what you do. I will talk about gold a little bit later for sure. White gold is the trickiest I've found to cast with. I suppose it has to do with the nickel. I'm not sure. I've definitely gotten pits before in my metal. The kind of white gold that I cast with is Stoller's Bright White, which has more nickel in it. I like the sheen of it. I also just find it creates a much cleaner cast. The problem I've found with production with that bright white casting gold is when I go to solder on top of it, if I have to. With this ring, I don't have to. It's just going to be a solid cast, so that's why I'm using it. Okay, so that's a nice surface for my metal to flow into the cavity, hopefully. Put that aside, and I'm gonna do the same thing to this one. All right, so now I'm ready to put these two molds together, and I just double checked to make sure that there's no loose sand. Definitely want to get all of that out. And this is a good time to just go over those air holes. because sometimes some sand falls through. And then these just go back together carefully. And then I always secure this with some kind of steel wire because it is a little bit loose, and when you're pouring your metal in, you definitely don't want it to open up because that will affect your cast. So you want this to be as closed and tight as possible. All right. Okay, so that's a look at making your sand cast mold. Next step is melting the metal and pouring it in, and fingers crossed, getting a quality piece of jewelry from that.